Hi, my name is Emma Carter, and I'm 29 years old. This is the story of how I gave my father everything, only to learn that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who let you down the hardest. Growing up, my parents had a rocky marriage. When I was 16, they divorced, and my father remarried a year later. His new wife, Linda, came with her own daughter, Stacy, who is 3 years younger than me. From the start, it was clear that Linda and Stacy didn't like me. They treated me like I didn't belong in their little family, and over time, I stopped trying to win them over. Still, I stayed close to my father. He was my only family after my mom moved overseas and remarried. I worked hard, putting myself through school and climbing the corporate ladder in real estate. By the time I was 28, I had saved enough money to buy a luxury house, a beautiful 5-bedroom home with high ceilings, a backyard pool, and all the amenities you could dream of. When I handed my father the keys to the house, I thought it was the best gift I could ever give him. He hugged me, tears in his eyes, and said, "You didn't have to do this, Emma." But deep down, I felt proud. I wanted him to have something special, a place he could call his own. What I didn't know was that my kind gesture would soon become my biggest regret. A few weeks after my father moved into the house, I decided to stop by for a surprise visit. I thought it would be nice to see him settling in and enjoying his new home. As I pulled up the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked out front. A sinking feeling hit my stomach, but I brushed it off and walked to the door. The sound of laughter greeted me as I stepped inside. I found my father sitting at the dining table with Linda and Stacy, who had apparently made themselves quite comfortable. Linda was sipping wine while Stacy scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. "Emma," my father said, standing up to greet me. Come in, come in. You should have called. I would have had dinner ready for you." Linda shot me a tight-lipped smile, and Stacy didn't even look up. "Hi, Dad," I said, keeping my tone light. "I didn't realize you had company." "Oh, they've moved in," my father said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Linda and Stacy needed a place to stay, and this house is too big for just me." "It makes sense." My stomach dropped. "Moved-ins?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes," Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's such a lovely house, Emma. You did a wonderful job choosing it. It's perfect for us." Us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the house I had bought for my father, not for his entire second family. I decided to let it go for the moment, reminding myself that this was my gift to my father. If he wanted to share it with them, fine. But as the evening went on, it became clear that Linda and Stacy didn't see me as the generous daughter who had provided them with a home. To them, I was an outsider, an inconvenience. At dinner, Stacy made snide remarks about my outfit, calling it too basic for someone who claims to work in real estate. Linda laughed along, adding, "She's just young. She'll figure it out eventually." My father said nothing. He sat there silently, smiling awkwardly, as if their words didn't matter. It was a punch to the gut. After dinner, I tried to speak to him privately. "Dad, I'm glad you're happy here, but don't you think it's a bit soon for Linda and Stacy to move in? I mean, I bought this house for you." He frowned, almost offended. "Emma, they're my family too. Don't make this into an issue. They needed a home, and you have plenty of space." I wanted to scream, but instead, I nodded and left. As I drove home, I promised myself that I wouldn't let their behavior bother me. After all, this was about my dad, not them. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. A month passed, and things went from bad to worse. I tried visiting my father a few more times, hoping to build a relationship with Linda and Stacy for his sake, but each visit ended the same way, with insults, passive-aggressive comments, and my father sitting silently as if nothing was wrong. One afternoon, I arrived at the house unannounced, hoping to catch my father alone. Instead, I walked into a scene that made my blood boil. Stacy was lounging on the couch, her shoes kicked off, and dirty socks on the white cushions. Linda was in the kitchen, loudly criticizing the furniture, the decor, and the appliances, everything I had picked out. "This couch is so uncomfortable," Stacy whined. "I don't know why your dad didn't buy something better." It's probably because Emma's cheap, Linda replied, loud enough for me to hear. I cleared my throat, stepping into the living room. Both women froze, startled by my presence. Stacy rolled her eyes, muttering, "Great, the landlord's here." I ignored her and turned to Linda. "Is my dad home?" "He's out," Linda said, her tone cold. "Why are you here?" "Because this is my house," I said, my voice firm. "I came to see my father, not to be insulted in my own property." Linda laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Your house? Last I checked, you gave it to your dad. That makes it his house, and by extension, ours." I was stunned by her audacity. "Legally, this house is mine. I let my father live here out of love and respect, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me like this." Linda's face turned red with anger. "You're just bitter because your father finally has a real family. Maybe if you weren't so selfish, you'd understand that." That was the final straw. I walked out, furious, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. I needed to know my rights before things spiraled further out of control. The next day, I returned to the house, determined to confront my father. He was sitting in the backyard, reading a book, looking as if nothing was wrong. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. He looked up, confused. "What's wrong, Emma?" "What's wrong?" I repeated, incredulous. "Linda and Stacy are treating me like garbage in a house I bought for you. They're disrespectful, ungrateful, and they have no right to speak to me the way they do. And you just sit there and let it happen." His expression hardened. "Emma, you're overreacting. Linda and Stacy are family now. You need to stop creating problems." "Creating problems?" I said, my voice rising. "I gave you this house because I love you, but I didn't sign up for this kind of treatment. If you can't stand up for me, then maybe I need to reconsider letting you live here." He stood up, his face red with anger. "Are you threatening me? After everything I've done for you? Everything you've done for me?" I asked, laughing bitterly. "I've worked my whole life to buy you this house, and this is how you repay me? By letting them treat me like dirt?" "Emma, you're being selfish," he said. "This house is my home now, and you need to accept that." I stared at him, heartbroken. The man I had idolized, worked so hard to please, was standing with the people who disrespected me the most. At that moment, I realized I was done trying to win his approval. I left without another word and went straight to my lawyer. Over the next week, I had eviction notices drawn up for Linda and Stacy. When they arrived in the mail, all hell broke loose. Linda called me, screaming about how I was destroying her life. Stacy sent me a string of nasty text messages, calling me every name in the book. My father showed up at my apartment, furious. "How could you do this, Emma?" he demanded. "They have nowhere else to go." "They should have thought about that before treating me like a second-class citizen in my own house," I replied coldly. "They have 30 days to leave. After that, I'm selling the house." He stared at me, shocked. "You're selling it?" "Yes," I said firmly. "This house was supposed to be a gift, but all it's brought me is pain. I'm done." The eviction notice sent Linda and Stacy into a frenzy. They refused to leave quietly, and instead, they turned the house into a war zone. When I stopped by to check on the property a week later, I found the lawn overgrown, trash bags piling up by the garage, and the once pristine interior in disarray. Stacy greeted me with a smug grin as I entered the house. "You really think you're going to kick us out? Good luck with that." I ignored her and walked past to inspect the damage. The carpets were stained, the walls scuffed, and the kitchen counter had a large crack running down the middle. It was clear they were retaliating against me. Linda appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. "You're making a big mistake, Emma. Do you think anyone will want to buy this house after we're done with it?" Her threat was thinly veiled, but I refused to let them see how angry I was. "If you damage this property further, I'll sue for every penny. You have 21 days left to vacate. Use that time wisely." I turned and left, my heart pounding. I had hoped they would handle this with some dignity, but clearly, that was too much to ask. As the eviction deadline approached, tensions boiled over. My father called me one evening, begging me to reconsider. Emma, please, he said, his voice strained. You can't do this to us. Linda and Stacy have nowhere to go. They should have thought about that before destroying my property, I said firmly. You've stood by them through all of this, Dad. You never once defended me. I'm done trying to make this work. Emma, I'm your father, he said, his tone shifting to anger. You owe me respect. I owed you love and respect, and I gave you both, I replied. But respect is a two-way street, and you let them walk all over me. This is the consequence of your choices. He hung up on me, and I knew it was the end of whatever relationship we had left. When the final day arrived, I showed up with a locksmith and a moving crew, prepared to take back control of the house. Linda and Stacy were still there, bags half-packed, shouting and crying as the movers worked around them. This is illegal. Linda shrieked. You can't just throw us out like this. It's perfectly legal, I replied, holding up the court order. You've had 30 days to leave. Now it's time for you to go. Stacy shoved past me, knocking a box out of my hands. You're going to regret this, she hissed. You'll end up alone, just like you deserve.
I didn't respond.
The movers escorted them off the property, and by the end of the day, the house was empty. I stood in the living room, staring at the mess they had left behind. It wasn't just the physical damage, it was the emotional weight of everything that had happened. Over the next month, I had the house cleaned, repaired, and listed for sale. Despite the drama, it sold quickly, and I made a substantial profit. For the first time in months, I felt free. My father called once more after the sale, but this time, I didn't answer. I knew he was calling to ask for money or forgiveness, but I had nothing left to give him. I used the money from the sale to move to a new city and start fresh. I bought a small but cozy apartment and poured my energy into my career and personal happiness. The experience had been painful, but it taught me an important lesson. You can't let people take advantage of your kindness, even if they're family. As I sat on my new balcony, watching the sunset, I realized I didn't regret a single decision. I had reclaimed my power, my peace, and my future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home.